Hi, I'm Johnny and you're watching the Hexy Beast. And on today's episode we're going to be doing something a little bit different and something I'm actually quite excited about. We're going to be doing my top 10 solo dice games. So anyway, let's just get the titles out of the way and start looking at those games, shall we? Okay, so welcome to my top solo dice games list. I just want to say that every game in this list is something I own, so if you've seen me covering dice games that I've received for review, they're not eligible for this list. Also, I've decided to exclude some things like Too Many Bones, etc. Mainly because otherwise it's just going to appear on every list, and to me that's more of an RPG game than it is a dice game. It's a more adventure crawl, so I haven't included any dungeon crawls or anything like that either. Okay, so that first brings us on to our honourable mentions, and the first one on the list is Railroad Inc. And I just want to say that I do quite enjoy this game. It's a fun little roll and write. You roll a few dice and then you fill in a sheet, and as you're filling it in with the dry write markers, you're scoring points for connecting stations and completing various goals. It's one of those games that I quite enjoy. I keep it in my backpack, but it didn't quite make the top 10, so for that reason it's in the honourable mentions list. And that brings us on to my next honourable mention, which in fact is Troy Dice by Pearl Games. One of the reasons this one didn't make it on the list is because one of the games on the list is also from Pearl Games, and I just felt that this is kind of more of a dice version of another Euro game, which is basically sort of like, it's kind of like worker placement, but you're using dice to decide how many times you can perform an action. There is a review on my channel of this, if you go check it out. So that's Troy Dice, and that's also in the honourable mentions. And the last one in the honourable mentions, purely because I have a personal connection to it, and that's this game here. And this game, Dragon Ball Z Perfect Cell the Dice game from IDW, which apparently are not around anymore, was actually the very first game I owned, and it was the way I discovered the solo gaming hobby. And in fact it was also the very first review on the channel, which is quite cringeworthy. So for that reason I've also included this in the honourable mention, as dice games is where I came into the hobby. Anyway, so let's just move on to the main list. That brings us on to number 10. Okay, so now it's time to get to the main meat of this list, and the first one on the list at number 10 is Nautillion from Z-Man Games. Now this is quite a fun game. It uses a roll to move mechanic where it's sort of mixed with drafting in a way that you're always picking the last dice left. There's actually the most recent review on my channel, so if you can go check that out, that would be helpful. I just want to say this is actually one of those games that I really enjoy. It's another one I keep in my backpack with Railroad Inc. But I find that because you can set this board out however you like, and it comes with a lot of expansions, there really is a lot of game in the box, and I just couldn't help but include it in the top 10. So this is Nautillion, my number 10 best solo dice game. Okay, so that brings us on to number 9, and the one I'm going to pick for number 9 is actually going to be this game right here, Escape the Dark Sector. Now this is quite a fun little dice drafting game. You're basically rolling for resolution, but there is quite a nice narrative that unfolds as you play. I find the fact that you can randomize the narrative kept it interesting for quite a while, but I do understand that there's not quite a lot of longevity there once you run out of cards to play. So I think for this one I'm going to have to pick up the expansion, but I do really enjoy its mix of story and dice rolling fun, and for that reason that's why it's got number 9 on this list. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so now we're on to number 8, and what do you think this one could be? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it's actually Sagrada. This was actually another one of the first videos on my channel. I think it was actually the third one, and I even do a little bit of magic in it where I flip some dice. It's kind of cheating, but I thought it was fun. But the reason I love this game is because there's just a nice little easy dice drafting mechanic. It plays very quickly. It's often the game I suggest to people when they're first starting out in the hobby. It just keeps the challenge coming, because every time you play it's kind of different. The different configs of tools, as well as the other expansions that are available to it, really do add something to it. And I don't think I would be anywhere near as much into this hobby if it wasn't for this game. So Sagrada, for that reason, has got number 8 on this list. Okay, so that brings us on to the next game on the list, which is actually number 7. In this case, it's Elder Sign from Fantasy Flight Games. Now this is quite a fun dice drafting game where you're trying to solve cards in order to defeat a great old one at the end. It really has that nice Lovecraftian feel. It was recently re-implemented with an X-Men theme on it, but if you ask me, it's just not as good. I really enjoy playing this one. It was just one of those games that it didn't take too long to play. So like if I was in the mood for an Arkham Horror game, or maybe Eldritch, which I don't actually own Eldritch anymore, I don't know why I mentioned that, or say Mansions of Madness or the card game, but I didn't really have time to play a full scenario, I think that Elder Sign is the perfect game to sort of just satisfy that Lovecraftian itch you've got in a shorter amount of time. So for that reason, that's why this game has got my number 7 on the list. Okay, so we're nearly at the end of the first half of the list, and what do you think is going to start kicking them off at number 6? Number 6, of course, I'm called the Hexy Beast, that's why I chose 6. But anyway, let's see what number 6 is, and number 6 is Magnificent. This is actually a really fun dice drafting game. You pull a dice and it chooses the amount of your power. But the interesting thing about this is that it actually causes you to pay rent at the end. So the more powerful dice you use, it will cost you more of your money. And it sort of has a nice polyomino side to it, where you're building out your circus and just adding new tents. And it's just generally a really thoughtful Euro game with dice as a main mechanic. For me, it's a dice game. It's got a nice bit of resource management in there, and a lot of the cards and the powers they do are actually really fun, and this is kind of like an unsung gem. I feel like it's underrated. Not a lot of people have played it. Not a lot of people I hear talking about it. It really is a great game, and that's why it's got number 6 on my top 10 dice games list. So anyway, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so that brings us on to my number 5, and in this case it's Arian from Z-Man Games. Yes, it's another game in the Universe, but I do quite enjoy the games in the Universe, and for me this one has proven to be quite a gem, because I quite like playing poker, and this is kind of like poker but with dice, but you've also got that aspect of you're trying to build ships and basically finish the game without running out of cards. If cards run out, you lose. It's kind of that simple, and it's just another game in the Universe that I really like the art style for. It plays quite quickly, but it has a lot more thought on it than say something like Nautilus. So for that reason, I think that Arian is a great game, and that's why it's got number 5 in this list. There will be a review coming soon of this one as well, so keep your eyes peeled. Anyway, let's just move on to the next one. Okay, so that brings us on to my number 4, which is another small box game, which is a one-deck dungeon. And this is kind of designed to mimic that dungeon crawl feel, but in a sort of small box card format. But you do roll a lot of dice, and it's pretty much a drafting game. So to do your attacks, you roll certain coloured dice relating to your certain stats. So you have pink ones, blue ones, clear ones, wild ones, etc. And it's just generally a good time, a bit of a dungeon crawl. You're going through floors of a dungeon in order to beat a boss at the end. It's got quite a few characters in it. This is actually the Forest of Shadows version, but there is also a base game. I've been really enjoying this one. I actually play it quite a lot, hence why it's got number 4 on this list. I think if you're a solo gamer and you haven't played one of the one deck dungeon games, I think you should definitely give it a try. So for that reason, it got number 4 on this list. Okay, so now we're down to the top 3. Things are getting quite serious. What's it going to be? What's next? Let's find out. And I think for number 3, it couldn't really be anything else but Under Falling Skies. Now this really is a great game. It comes with a brilliant puzzle mode. It's like sort of a really good solo game. It plays only solo, so that's really nice, although if you've seen some of Paul Grogan's video on this, he's done some multiplayer playthroughs which are actually really good to watch, so check them out. But one of the things I love about Under Falling Skies is the fact that in this main box version, as I've been playing it since the print and play, that it comes with a whole new campaign with stories, a bit of a globe-trotting thing going on with it. It has nice comic book art in it to sort of explain the bits between the chapters. It's generally just a very good dice game. It's a very thinky puzzle. It's a very tricky puzzle, and it just seems to keep coming to the table. I just love it so much. So for that reason, it's got number 3 in my top 10 dice games. So let's move on to the last couple. Ooh, this is getting exciting now. We're on to the last 2. And what do you think number 2 could be? Well, I'm going to tell you what it is. In fact, number 2 is Rallyman GT. Now, this is one of my favourite games to play, and I really like that it has an interesting roll to move mechanic. I say roll to move. It's more about shifting gears as you go around the track. It has a really nice solo time trial mode, but there's also a really good fan-made solo mode for AI racing. It's generally just a lot of customizability. There's a lot of replayability, and I think the fun factor when you crash that car and when they spin out, it really is something else. It's also one of the few games I can get some of my non-gamer friends to play, and they really enjoy it. Even though it's a solo game in this case, but it is just one of those games I do play a lot. I play it online. I've set times that are in like at least the top 20, so if you want to go on BGA you can try and beat them. But I really do love the Rallyman game, and I'm really looking forward to see what's inside Dirt when it arrives. Anyway, that was my number 2. Let's move on to the best solo dice game. Okay, so that brings us on to my number 1 solo dice game, and the game I've chosen is going to be Black Angel from Pearl games, and I just have to say that I really love this game. It was one of the earliest games in my collection. I really like its mix of resource management, dice placement, worker placement. There's generally a lot to think about in this game. It's played over 3 boards, it takes up a lot of table space, but I really do like its dice mechanics. The dice in this game only count up to the 3, which is another thing I also like, and because the pips on the dice are also hex shaped, there's just not really any reason for me not to like this one. I've been playing it my whole time I've been solo gaming. It was one of the first games in my collection. I still keep playing it. It gets a lot of table time from me. In fact, we spoke about Under Falling Skies earlier. I actually used the pieces from this game to play the print and play version when that first came out. So that is why I absolutely love Black Angel. It's got the perfect blend of dice placement and euro mechanics for me, and that is why it made #1 on my list. Okay, so that was my top 10 solo dice games. I've been really enjoying making this list. It was a lot of fun playing the games to actually produce it, and I didn't actually realise I had this many dice games. At first it was going to be a top 5, but it ended up being a top 10. But anyway, if you like the look of any of the games I featured on this list or any of the stuff behind me, please feel free to check out the link to Firestorm Games in my description. Also, if you've been enjoying the content, please feel free to smash that sub button by there and check out another one of my videos by here. Anyway, I've been Johnny, you've been watching the Hexy Beast. Thank you for watching, and most of all, stay hexy everyone!